Ethan opened his eyes to a strange, cold light. The room around him was unlike anything he had ever seen. Smooth metallic walls reflected a soft blue glow, and panels with blinking lights ran across every surface. He tried to move, but heavy restraints pinned his wrists and ankles to a sleek, polished floor. The air smelled faintly of ozone and metal, a scent that made his stomach twist in unease. He tried to remember how he had ended up here, but his memories were fragmented. Bright flashes of white light, a sudden pull, and then a blur of shapes. One thing was clear: he was no longer on Earth. The door to the chamber slid open silently, revealing figures that made him freeze in fear. They were tall, thin, and covered in smooth, iridescent skin. Their heads were elongated, with multiple eyes that glowed faintly in dim light. They moved with a grace that was almost hypnotic, their long fingers tapping against some invisible controls. "Ah," one of them said in a voice that was both musical and cold. "The human has awoken." Ethan tried to speak, but his voice came out as a hoarse whisper. "Where am I?" The alien's glowing eyes narrowed slightly as if amused. "You are ours now. You will learn your place." Ethan's heart pounded. The words were clear. Even though he did not understand the nuances of their language, somehow he knew exactly what they meant. He had heard stories, tales whispered in human colonies and research files, that some alien races captured beings from other worlds. They prized humans for their rarity and their perceived fragility. He had been brought here not to fight but to serve, or worse, to be nothing more than an object of curiosity. Days passed, though Ethan had no way to mark time. The aliens fed him strange nutrient gels that tasted faintly metallic but kept him alive. They monitored him constantly, their glowing eyes tracking his every movement. At first he had tried to resist, thrashing against his restraints, but it was pointless. Their strength and technology were beyond anything he had ever known. Yet even in captivity, Ethan refused to surrender his mind. He studied the aliens carefully. He noted their routines, the way they communicated with each other, and the patterns in their security systems. They moved confidently, certain that he was powerless. That confidence was their first mistake. Late one night, when the ship hummed quietly and most of the aliens were in stasis chambers, Ethan began his first experiment. He reached with his fingers toward the nearest panel, careful not to touch it fully, just enough to feel its energy. He could sense currents of power flowing beneath the smooth surface. He remembered what he had learned in engineering class back on Earth. Perhaps he could use his knowledge here. Hours passed as he tested, probed, and calculated. Every time a small alarm went off, he would freeze, waiting for alien footsteps that never came. By the end of the third cycle, he had figured out a basic way to manipulate the panel's minor functions, turning lights on and off, unlocking minor doors. It was not much, but it was a start. Ethan smiled to himself. If they thought humans were weak and slow, they were in for a surprise. Over the next few days, he expanded his observations. He noted that the aliens underestimated physical danger in ways that were predictable. Their own guards rarely noticed anomalies in their systems because they believed nothing from a human could interfere. Their arrogance was astonishing, but it was also an opportunity. One afternoon, an alien with pale lavender skin approached him. Its eyes flickered in what Ethan guessed was amusement. "Human," it said, "you attempt to—" "What is it, manipulate?" Ethan met the glowing eyes without fear. "I am learning," he said calmly. "To understand is not to defy, it is preparation." The alien studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "Interesting. You may continue, but failure has consequences." Ethan had learned quickly that bluffing combined with calm confidence could buy him small advantages. He nodded respectfully and went back to his experiments. The alien left, and Ethan could feel his pulse quicken. Each day he became more confident. Each observation gave him ideas. By the 7th day, he had crafted a simple tool using scraps of alien material he had secretly collected. It was crude, a small device that could interact with control panels without triggering alarms. But for Ethan, it was revolutionary. With it, he could manipulate sections of the ship's systems without being detected. One evening, as he experimented, a strange sound echoed through the chamber. The hum of the ship grew louder, accompanied by faint tremors in the floor. Through the reinforced windows of his chamber, he saw the stars outside twist and shimmer. The ship was entering some sort of faster-than-light travel. The aliens were celebrating quietly, their melodic voices filling the corridors. They had no idea that their plaything was learning faster than they could imagine. Ethan realized something crucial. Humans had an advantage they had never considered: unpredictability. While the aliens relied on routine, patterns, and rigid logic, humans thrived on creativity, improvisation, and intuition. Where they saw weakness, there could be hidden strength. Where they saw submission, there could be defiance. That night, Ethan lay on the cold floor and whispered to himself, "They think they own me, but one day, they will regret it." As the ship moved deeper into unknown space, Ethan's mind worked tirelessly. He sketched diagrams of the alien ship in his mind, memorized the location of key systems, and thought about escape, not just for himself, but for any other beings who might suffer at the hands of these arrogant captors. A week later, his opportunity arrived. During the aliens' cycle of rest, the ship's systems powered down in sections. Ethan moved quickly, using his makeshift device to unlock a maintenance hatch near his chamber. The hatch led to a network of narrow corridors filled with pipes and conduits. It was dangerous, cramped, and unfamiliar, but it was a first step. Creeping through the tunnels, he listened to the distant hum of alien machinery. Shadows danced on the walls, cast by strange lights overhead. Each step required precision and patience. A single mistake could mean detection, or worse. He paused near a junction and heard voices approaching. Two aliens were conversing in a language he had only begun to understand. Their words were sharp, melodic, and precise. Ethan pressed against the wall, holding his breath as they passed. The aliens did not notice him. Their overconfidence blinded them. Finally, after what felt like hours, Ethan reached a larger chamber filled with glowing panels and pulsing energy cores. He could feel the power thrumming beneath his fingers. He examined a control console, realizing that if he learned how to manipulate it, he could influence the ship itself. For the first time, he allowed himself a smile, a human smile full of determination and defiance. The aliens had brought him here thinking they could amuse themselves at his expense. They thought he would remain weak, submissive, and entertaining. They had no idea what he was capable of. Ethan sat in the shadows, studying the controls, making careful notes in his mind. The journey ahead would be long, dangerous, and uncertain. But one thing was certain: he would not remain a prisoner. And as the stars streaked past the ship's windows, he whispered to himself once more, "I may be their captive today, but tomorrow I will be their terror." The first part of Ethan's story had ended, but his true journey, the journey of human ingenuity, courage, and unstoppable determination, was only beginning. Ethan crouched in the shadows of the control chamber, the hum of alien machinery vibrating through the floor. The corridors around him were empty, the faint lights casting long, strange shadows on the walls. He had barely escaped his chamber the night before, yet he already felt the hunger to do more. Survival alone was no longer enough. He wanted knowledge. He wanted power, quiet, careful, and absolute. He studied the glowing panels in front of him. Their layout was complex, almost impossibly so, but Ethan was a human, and humans were nothing if not adaptable. He traced the patterns with his eyes, memorizing every blinking light, every switch, and every symbol etched into the surface. To the aliens, these symbols were second nature, like letters on a page. To Ethan, they were puzzles waiting to be solved. His first attempts were cautious. He touched the panels lightly with the improvised device he had fashioned. At first, nothing happened. Then a faint light blinked on a nearby console, responding to the device's presence. His heart leapt. He tested it again, adjusting the pressure, moving his fingers slightly differently. Slowly, incrementally, he learned how to send tiny signals through the alien systems. "They think they are smarter than humans," he muttered under his breath. "They have no idea." Days turned into cycles as Ethan devoted himself to learning. He mapped the ship in his mind, noting the locations of key energy cores, storage areas, and command nodes. He listened to the aliens carefully, learning their language bit by bit. Their words were strange, flowing, and musical, but he noticed patterns. Certain syllables repeated when they gave orders. Certain gestures accompanied commands. He practiced silently, mouthing the words, testing himself until he could mimic them without moving his lips noticeably. Ethan discovered that not all aliens were cruel or arrogant. In the maintenance sections, he observed smaller, weaker workers who moved with caution and fear, their heads bowed under the watchful eyes of the commanders. They seemed tired, almost resigned to their existence. He realized that even in a society built on superiority, fear could suppress rebellion, but fear could also be manipulated. One evening, he approached a maintenance worker cautiously, keeping to the shadows. He extended a hand with a small piece of alien material he had collected, a gift in the language of curiosity. The alien hesitated, then nodded, accepting it. From that moment, a silent alliance formed. Ethan could not trust many, but even one ally could provide invaluable insight. Through this connection, he learned details about the ship's energy system. The aliens relied heavily on a network of nodes to power the ship, control doors, and manage life support. Disrupt a node and a corridor could become useless. A door could remain locked, or a power surge could distract the guards. Ethan realized that even small acts of interference could shift the balance of power. He began experimenting. He waited for moments when the larger aliens were in their chambers of rest. He moved quickly, manipulating panels to shut down lights, reroute energy, and cause minor malfunctions. The first time it happened, a door that should have opened simply stayed closed. A guard tapped it, puzzled, and finally left. Ethan's pulse raced with excitement. For the first time, he felt a taste of control in this alien world. But he was careful. Every act of sabotage was calculated, minor enough to avoid immediate detection, yet meaningful enough to test his understanding of the system. He learned patience, the human skill of waiting, observing, and striking only when the moment was right. At night, when the ship was quiet and the stars streaked past the windows in strange arcs, Ethan practiced more than just technology. He practiced stealth. He moved silently through corridors, noting air currents, guard rotations, and hidden spaces. Humans had always been underestimated in history for their speed of learning and adaptability. Ethan used both. His mind and body became a weapon in themselves, as precise and sharp as any tool he could craft. One day, an unexpected challenge arrived. A new group of aliens arrived on the ship, larger and more intimidating than any Ethan had seen. Their arrival created a tense buzz among the crew. The new aliens were observers, inspectors who would report on the humans and other captives. Their eyes glowed with suspicion, scanning every corner of the ship. Ethan stayed hidden, studying them. They moved differently from the others, more deliberate, more analytical. But he noticed one flaw. Their reliance on technology was absolute. They rarely glanced at the corridors themselves. They trusted their instruments more than their senses. That night, Ethan tested this flaw. He used a small device to temporarily scramble the sensors in a corridor. When the inspectors passed, their instruments showed nothing unusual. But Ethan, crouched in the shadows, watched as they hesitated, checking again and again. Their overconfidence, their dependence on machines became a human advantage. By the next cycle, he was ready to take a small risk. He approached the control nodes with precise confidence, rerouting energy to a secondary system. The effect was subtle. Lights flickered, alarms buzzed briefly, and some doors failed to lock. To the casual observer, it would seem like a minor malfunction, but for Ethan, it was proof of concept. He had the ability to influence the ship itself, quietly, invisibly, and without detection. His quiet success also inspired him mentally. He realized humans had something the aliens could never fully understand: creativity under pressure, the ability to improvise when situations changed, and an instinctive understanding of unpredictability. These traits had allowed humans to survive countless wars and disasters on their own planet. Here in the alien ship, they were just as potent. During one of these nights, Ethan overheard a conversation that chilled him, but also motivated him. The inspector spoke of sending some captives to other ships, or worse, experimenting on them to study human fragility. They did not notice Ethan crouched behind a panel, listening, his hands clenched. Humans might be small, weak in raw strength, but strength was not the only weapon. Intelligence, cunning, and the ability to turn disadvantages into advantages were far deadlier. He knew then that survival was only the first step. Freedom and maybe revenge would follow. Weeks passed, but Ethan's mind raced constantly. He refined his tools, learning which panels could be controlled from a distance and which required direct contact. He memorized every routine of the guards, every shift change, and every vulnerability in the ship's systems. By combining observation, experimentation, and his innate human adaptability, he created mental maps of escape routes, security blind spots, and power nodes. He also began to communicate subtly with the maintenance workers he had earned the trust of. Using gestures and small tokens, he taught them to anticipate minor adjustments in the ship's systems, lights here, doors there, without revealing his true abilities. Slowly, a network of allies emerged. They were cautious, fearful, but intelligent, and their loyalty could be a force multiplier. One night, as the ship cruised silently through deep space, Ethan paused to look out a window. The stars stretched in endless lines, and a strange, quiet awe filled him. He realized something important. Humans had always looked to the stars, always dreamed of more, and always found ways to reach it. These aliens might have advanced technology, but they lacked imagination. They had not anticipated that a human, even in chains, could learn, adapt, and begin to turn the tide. Ethan whispered to himself, a vow he would carry through every dark corridor and every struggle yet to come. I will not be their toy. I will not be their captive. One day they will see what a human can do. That night, for the first time, he allowed himself to imagine the future. Not just survival, not just small acts of sabotage, but freedom, influence, power, and perhaps even a reckoning for those who had underestimated humans so completely. As he rested, alert even in sleep, Ethan felt the beginnings of a new resolve. Every failure, every observation, and every tiny victory added to a growing understanding. The aliens had brought him here to be powerless. Instead, he would turn their assumptions against them. Human ingenuity, adaptability, and courage were invisible weapons, and Ethan intended to wield them with precision. The first step had been learning. The second step, he realized, would be action. Ethan moved silently through the narrow corridors, his heart pounding with anticipation. Weeks of observation, learning, and preparation had led to this moment. He had discovered a vulnerability in the ship's systems, a flaw in the security nodes that controlled key sections of the vessel. If used correctly, it could allow him to disrupt lights, doors, and communications for short bursts without immediate detection. It was a small advantage, but it was enough to begin the first strike. He crouched near the junction of two main corridors, his device in hand. The alien guards passed above him, unaware of his presence. Ethan's mind ran through the plan again. Disrupt the lights, lock a door temporarily, create confusion, then retreat before anyone could investigate thoroughly. Timing would be everything. He activated the device, sending a pulse through the nearest node. The lights flickered, then dimmed entirely in one corridor. A series of metallic clanks echoed as a nearby door failed to lock properly. From above, Ethan heard the confused chatter of alien voices. He smiled faintly. The first strike was simple, but it worked. For the next hour, he repeated the process in careful sequences, always retreating to the shadows before detection. Each minor disruption tested his understanding of the ship and the aliens' responses. He began noticing patterns, how quickly they reacted, which signals they trusted, and which systems were less monitored. By the end of the cycle, Ethan had caused enough chaos to shake the confidence of even the most arrogant of the alien crew. Guards moved hesitantly, double-checking panels, and commanders murmured questions that went unanswered. The ship hummed with confusion, all orchestrated by one human who they believed to be weak and harmless. Ethan's heart raced, but he forced himself to remain calm. This was just the beginning. Small victories built experience, and experience built confidence. He allowed himself a quiet thought. Humans were clever. Humans were unpredictable. And humans could turn apparent weakness into strength. The following days were a blur of careful observation, experimentation, and minor strikes. Ethan discovered that a simple overload in one node could create a cascading effect, locking multiple doors simultaneously. Another sequence could shut down sections of lights, leaving entire corridors in near darkness. He combined these effects with his knowledge of alien patrol routes, creating opportunities to move undetected through areas previously impossible to traverse. One evening, he decided to test the limits further. The ship's main communication hub lay at the heart of a restricted zone. Control of this hub would allow him to send false signals and redirect resources. Ethan knew the risks were greater than ever. Detection here could mean immediate punishment or worse, but the reward was worth it. He waited for the aliens to enter their rest cycles and slipped into the maintenance corridors, moving like a shadow among shadows. The path was narrow, the walls humming with energy from nearby conduits. Every step required caution. He reached the edge of the hub's outer chamber and paused, listening. Guards were stationed at intervals, their glowing eyes sweeping the corridors. Ethan activated a minor device first, causing a subtle flicker in the lights. One guard hesitated, scanning the shadows. Ethan froze, holding his breath, and then moved carefully to the next blind spot. With each step, he memorized the timing of the guard's movements, the pulse of fear mixed with excitement in his chest, but he let it fuel him rather than paralyze him. Finally, he reached the outer panel of the communication hub. The device he had constructed fit neatly into one of the interface slots. With a few careful adjustments, he sent a small surge through the system. Panels blinked rapidly, then stabilized, reflecting false readings. Doors that were supposed to be locked unlocked. Communication signals shifted slightly, confusing the network. Ethan stepped back, observing. It worked. The first strike on a major system had succeeded. He had infiltrated the heart of the alien ship without being detected. The feeling was intoxicating, but he knew better than to celebrate too loudly. Every success now made him a target. Over the next few cycles, Ethan became bolder. He began moving between sectors, testing which systems he could manipulate with precision. Lights, doors, minor alarms, he controlled them all. Each act of sabotage, though small, made the aliens uneasy. Their confidence wavered. Their previously rigid routines began to show cracks. The maintenance workers he had subtly allied with started to notice the changes. They exchanged cautious nods with Ethan in hidden corridors, understanding without words that someone or something was turning the tide. Though they were fearful, they respected his intelligence and initiative. Slowly, a network of observers and helpers formed, guided by the human who had dared to challenge the order of the ship. But not all the aliens were fools. The first major reaction came from an inspector, the larger alien who had arrived weeks earlier. It noticed irregularities in the network logs, doors that should have locked, lights that flickered at impossible intervals. It did not yet know the cause, but suspicion began to grow. Ethan observed it from the shadows, careful not to reveal himself. The inspector moved through corridors, its glowing eyes scanning for anomalies. It was intelligent, patient, and cautious. The kind of alien that could have stopped him if it discovered his activities. Yet it too had one flaw: reliance on predictability. The human mind, Ethan realized, thrived on unpredictability, and that would be his greatest weapon. One night, the inspector approached a sector Ethan had recently tampered with. Ethan waited, tense, analyzing the alien's movements. The inspector paused, tapping a panel with long, deliberate fingers. Lights flickered briefly. It frowned. Then, instead of calling for reinforcements immediately, it checked the logs and moved on. Ethan exhaled slowly. The inspector had not detected him, but it had grown suspicious. The balance of power was shifting. The alien crew had underestimated humans for the last time. His next steps required more precision. Ethan began experimenting with sequences that combined multiple nodes: lights, doors, minor energy surges, and communication disruptions. Each sequence was carefully timed to create maximum confusion with minimal chance of detection. He was learning not just how to survive, but how to control the environment around him. As the days passed, Ethan began to notice a strange change among the crew. Small whispers, nervous glances, and repeated checks of systems indicated a growing fear. The same aliens who had once mocked him now hesitated in his presence, even unknowingly. Their perception of humans as weak and harmless was crumbling. Ethan allowed himself a private smile. The first strike had succeeded in more ways than one. He had not only tested the ship's systems, but he had also tested the aliens' assumptions. Humans were clever. Humans adapted. Humans survived, and when necessary, humans struck back. It was during one of these nights, while observing a key corridor, that Ethan realized another truth. He was no longer just a captive learning to survive. He was a threat. His understanding of the ship, combined with human unpredictability, meant that he could influence events in ways the aliens could not anticipate. Every minor disruption had the potential to grow into something much larger, and that possibility thrilled him. Ethan moved through the corridors with confidence now. Each strike built on the last. Lights flickered in perfect sequences, doors failed at the right moment, and communications carried misleading signals. Guards hesitated, inspectors doubted, and the ship itself seemed subtly altered by the presence of one determined human. He paused one night, looking out of a window at the streaking stars. The hum of the ship beneath him felt like a heartbeat, responding to his influence. Humans had always dreamed of the stars, always pushed against the limits of survival and exploration. And here he was, alone, underestimated, and already bending a galaxy of aliens to his will, even if they did not know it yet. Ethan whispered into the silence of the corridors, a quiet vow that carried the weight of weeks of planning and learning. They think I am weak. They think I am a toy. They are wrong. Very wrong. And soon, very soon, they will learn what it means to underestimate a human. The first strike had ended, but the war had only begun. Ethan moved swiftly through the ship's maintenance corridors, the faint hum of energy nodes guiding him like a heartbeat. Every step he took was calculated. He had spent weeks learning the patterns of the alien crew, understanding the strengths and weaknesses of the ship, and quietly experimenting with their systems. Now he was ready for more than minor disruptions. He was ready to ignite a rebellion. The maintenance workers he had befriended watched him carefully as he passed. They had become his silent allies, sharing knowledge and helping him navigate the labyrinthine ship. Their fear of the alien inspectors was still present, but they trusted Ethan's intelligence and leadership. Slowly, the spark of hope that humans could resist was spreading. "Tonight," Ethan whispered, "we take control of a sector, small at first, but enough to show them they are not invincible." He gathered his allies in a dim corner of the maintenance area. Using gestures and symbols he had improvised, he explained the plan: to manipulate power nodes, cut lights in key corridors, and lock doors to create confusion. The maintenance workers nodded, their trust in him clear. They were frightened but willing. And that willingness was enough. The operation began during the aliens' rest cycle. Ethan and his team moved like shadows, slipping into corridors that would normally be patrolled heavily. At his command, lights flickered, doors failed to lock or unlock, and minor alarms buzzed and stopped. Confusion spread among the alien crew like a ripple in water. Guards hesitated, inspectors murmured questions, and even the more confident aliens began to second-guess their assumptions. Ethan watched from the shadows, satisfied. His plan worked perfectly. The first phase of the rebellion had begun, and the aliens were learning that humans were not so weak after all. As the hours passed, he increased the scale of their strikes. Power nodes were manipulated more aggressively, locking down entire sections of the ship. Communications were rerouted to create false signals. Minor energy surges caused lights to flicker in corridors, adding to the chaos. The aliens were scrambling, their confidence shaken. For the first time, they feared a human. Ethan's allies helped quietly, moving through restricted areas to assist with the disruptions. Together, they created the illusion of a force far larger than it actually was. The aliens had no idea that one human and a handful of allies could cause such disruption. During one particularly tense moment, an inspector approached a sector Ethan had recently tampered with. Its glowing eyes scanned the corridor, its movements cautious and deliberate. Ethan held his breath, waiting. The inspector paused, tapping the control panel, and then moved on, still puzzled. The human's small acts of defiance were slowly becoming legend among the maintenance crew, whispered as impossible feats. Encouraged, Ethan decided it was time to test the alien's perception further. Using his control over minor systems, he created a distraction near the central energy core. Lights flickered violently, alarms buzzed briefly, and guards rushed toward the source of the disturbance. In the chaos, Ethan led a group of maintenance workers to a previously inaccessible section of the ship. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. As they paused to catch their breath, Ethan looked at his allies. Their faces reflected a mix of fear and hope. He smiled faintly. "We are showing them that humans are not powerless," he said quietly. "Every step, every action matters. They will learn, slowly, but they will learn." Over the next few cycles, the rebellion expanded. Ethan's control over the ship's minor systems became more precise, allowing him to orchestrate multiple disruptions simultaneously. Lights flickered across several corridors at once. Doors failed in strategic sequences, and communications carried misleading information. The alien crew was disoriented, struggling to maintain order as their assumptions about humans crumbled. Ethan observed quietly, noting every reaction. The aliens' reliance on technology and predictable routines made them vulnerable. Where they expected obedience, they found cunning and adaptability. Where they assumed weakness, they found strategy and courage. Every small victory built momentum, and momentum built confidence. But with each success came increased risk. The inspector, a vigilant and intelligent alien, began to notice patterns in the disruptions. It moved through corridors with growing suspicion, tapping panels and checking logs meticulously. Ethan realized that it was only a matter of time before the alien began to actively search for the source of the rebellion. He did not panic. Instead, he used the inspector's caution against it. By creating subtle misdirections, flickering lights in one corridor while manipulating another section, he drew the alien's attention away from his true movements. Humans, Ethan reminded himself, thrived on unpredictability. The inspector relied on patterns. That difference was his advantage. One evening, Ethan discovered a new opportunity. The alien crew had underestimated the strategic importance of the ship's supply corridors. These sections were lightly monitored, yet they connected critical areas of the ship. If he could gain control over them, he could move freely and further disrupt operations. He assembled a small team of maintenance allies and led a silent operation. Lights flickered, doors misbehaved, and communications carried false signals. The corridors were theirs, at least temporarily. The rebels moved quickly, securing access points and observing alien responses. For the first time, they felt a real taste of control. Ethan paused, looking out of a nearby observation window at the stars streaking past. The hum of the ship beneath him seemed to pulse with energy, responding to the subtle manipulations he had orchestrated. Humans had always dreamed of the stars, always pushed boundaries and survived against impossible odds. Here, in the depths of an alien vessel, they were proving that same resilience once again. But the rebellion was still fragile. The aliens remained stronger, faster, and better equipped. Ethan knew that every success must be precise, every risk calculated. One mistake could unravel weeks of preparation. He reminded his allies of the importance of caution and patience, emphasizing that strategy and intelligence were more powerful than brute force. As the rebellion grew, the alien inspectors became increasingly wary. They began to patrol in unpredictable patterns, communicate with greater urgency, and monitor logs more closely. Yet even as suspicion increased, the effectiveness of Ethan's strikes continued to demonstrate human ingenuity. The aliens' overconfidence, their failure to anticipate creativity from a supposedly weak species, was being exploited at every turn. One night, after a particularly successful operation, Ethan gathered his allies in a secure maintenance chamber. The air was thick with excitement and tension. "We have shown them what humans can do," he said quietly. "But this is only the beginning. We will continue carefully, step by step. We will show them that underestimating humans is a mistake they cannot afford to make." The maintenance workers nodded, their trust in him evident. Fear had not disappeared, but it was tempered by hope. Humans, Ethan realized, had something the aliens could never fully comprehend: the ability to adapt, to think creatively, and to inspire others to act. That combination was far more dangerous than any weapon or system the aliens possessed. As the hours passed, Ethan moved through the corridors alone, observing the ship. He noted every reaction, every pause, every hesitation among the alien crew. Patterns emerged, weaknesses revealed themselves, and opportunities presented themselves. Each small act of sabotage, each carefully timed disruption, brought the humans one step closer to freedom. And yet Ethan knew the most difficult challenge lay ahead. The inspector, the intelligent alien who had grown suspicious, would eventually trace the disruptions. One confrontation was inevitable, but Ethan was prepared. Humans thrived in adversity. They adapted, learned, and overcame. And when the time came, he would use every skill, every ounce of ingenuity, to ensure that humans would not just survive, they would triumph. For the first time, Ethan allowed himself to envision the outcome: a ship controlled by humans, captives no longer at the mercy of aliens, and a crew that had underestimated their adversaries completely. The thought filled him with quiet determination. "They think they control the ship," he whispered to the empty corridors. "But we are the storm they cannot see coming. One day they will understand, and it will be too late." The rebellion had begun in whispers, in flickering lights and locked doors. But now, under Ethan's guidance, it was a growing force. The aliens' assumptions had been shattered, and humans were no longer the weak captives they had believed. Ethan moved to the edge of a corridor, watching an inspector pass below. His pulse was steady. His mind was clear. Humans were underestimated, yes, but underestimated beings often became the most dangerous. And Ethan, a human once bought for amusement, was about to become a force the aliens would never forget. Ethan stood at the edge of the main corridor, the hum of the ship vibrating beneath his feet. The rebellion he had quietly built over weeks was now ready to face its ultimate challenge. The aliens had begun to realize that the human they had dismissed as weak was, in fact, dangerous. Their arrogance had been shattered and the fear among the crew was growing. The next step was the heart of the ship, the command deck. Control of the deck meant control of the vessel, and Ethan knew the alien commander would not surrender it easily. The inspector who had been tracking the disturbances had grown suspicious, and Ethan anticipated that a confrontation was inevitable. But he was ready. Humans thrived in adversity, and he had spent weeks learning every system, every routine, every flaw of this alien ship. He signaled to the maintenance workers, now fully allies, and they moved in silent formation. Ethan had carefully orchestrated the sequence. Lights flickered to create confusion, doors locked and unlocked at precise moments, and communication signals carried misleading information. The aliens were disoriented, and the humans had the advantage of surprise. Ethan led the way, moving swiftly and silently through corridors that were once impossible to traverse. Guards hesitated at every turn, unsure of what was happening. The rebellion was no longer subtle. It was a force the aliens could not ignore. Finally, they reached the central access point to the command deck. Ethan paused, analyzing the situation. The deck was heavily guarded, and the commander himself would be waiting. But humans had something the aliens lacked: creativity and unpredictability. With careful precision, Ethan used the nodes he had manipulated to disable key security doors and reroute energy to create temporary blind spots. The team moved through the access point, slipping past guards who had no idea the humans were coming. Ethan's pulse remained steady, his mind focused. Every step, every calculation had led to this moment. He whispered to his allies, "Stay calm, follow my lead. Humans are not powerless." Inside the command deck, the alien commander waited, tall and imposing, its glowing eyes scanning for threats. It had already noticed the disruptions and understood that some human, was behind them. Its confidence was faltering, replaced by cautious calculation. Ethan stepped forward, his voice clear and unwavering. "You underestimated us," he said simply. The words carried more power than any weapon. Humans had survived, adapted, and learned faster than the aliens could anticipate. Now they were claiming what was rightfully theirs: control of the ship. The commander's eyes narrowed. "You are nothing," it said, but the uncertainty in its voice betrayed its fear. Ethan smiled faintly. "We are human, and humans are never nothing." With a swift gesture, he activated the device that controlled the command deck's energy nodes. Lights flickered, systems paused, and security protocols were overridden. The aliens who had once thought themselves invincible were now scrambling to regain control. Ethan's allies moved quickly, securing access points and ensuring the humans maintained the advantage. The commander reacted, sending pulses of energy through the systems in an attempt to regain control. But Ethan anticipated this. Every action had been planned, every contingency accounted for. He redirected the pulses, using the ship's own systems against the commander. Energy surged through sections of the deck, causing the aliens to stumble and falter. Ethan advanced steadily, his eyes locked on the commander. He did not attack recklessly. Humans were clever, and cleverness won wars. Using the nodes he had mastered, he created a sequence that isolated the commander from its support systems, leaving it vulnerable and off balance. The commander growled in frustration, a sound of anger and disbelief. "You are just one human." "Not just one," Ethan replied. "Humans are many, and we learn fast." With a final, precise sequence, Ethan disabled the remaining systems under the commander's control. The alien fell to its knees, overwhelmed by the sudden shift of power. The rebellion had succeeded. The humans controlled the command deck. Ethan signaled to his allies. They moved quickly to secure the rest of the ship. Maintenance workers and other captives inspired by the humans' courage joined in. The aliens, disoriented and unprepared, offered little resistance. What had begun as small disruptions had grown into a full-scale takeover. Through the corridors, whispers spread among the alien crew. The human they had dismissed as weak was now a force of unstoppable intelligence and strategy. Fear replaced arrogance, and respect began to take root in its place. Humans were no longer captives. They were leaders. Ethan paused at the central console, looking out at the stars streaking past the windows. The ship, once a prison, was now under human control. The weight of the moment pressed on him, but he felt no fear. He had learned, adapted, and fought with every skill humanity had to offer. The rebellion was complete, but Ethan knew this was only the beginning. The galaxy beyond the ship awaited, full of unknown challenges. But humans had proven something vital. Intelligence, courage, and adaptability could overcome even the most advanced forces. The commander, now subdued, looked at Ethan with a mixture of anger and awe. "You have changed everything," it said quietly. Ethan nodded. "Humans are not what you expected. We survive, we adapt, and we fight when necessary. Remember that." The commander, understanding the truth of those words, finally ceased resistance. Its glowing eyes dimmed in acceptance, acknowledging the human's triumph. Ethan turned to his allies, a quiet pride in his heart. They had followed him through fear, uncertainty, and danger. Together, they had shown the power of human ingenuity and courage. The once feared captives were now respected, feared, and admired for their determination. In the following cycles, Ethan worked with the maintenance workers and freed captives to stabilize the ship. Systems were repaired, energy flows normalized, and communication restored. Humans had learned quickly, but they also knew the importance of ensuring that no further harm came to any beings on board. Compassion, another human strength, guided their actions. As the ship moved steadily through the stars, Ethan reflected on what had happened. They had been brought here as captives, underestimated, and dismissed. They had been told they were weak. But humans were never weak. They adapted, they learned, and they overcame. From the shadows of the corridors to the control of the command deck, Ethan had transformed a dire situation into a triumph. And in doing so, he had proven a truth that would resonate far beyond the walls of this alien ship. Humans, underestimated though they may be, are a force to be reckoned with. The other captives looked to Ethan with admiration and gratitude. He had led not with fear, but with intelligence, strategy, and courage. The aliens who had once held them in chains now had no choice but to respect the humans' abilities. Ethan stood at the observation deck, looking out at the endless expanse of stars. "We survived," he whispered, "and we have shown what humans can do. But this is just the beginning. The universe is vast, and we have much to learn and much to achieve." The stars streaked past, silent witnesses to the triumph of one human who had been bought for amusement, but became the terror the aliens never expected. A legend was born, not through brute force alone, but through the ingenuity, courage, and determination that defined humanity. And in the quiet hum of the ship, Ethan smiled, knowing that the galaxy had been reminded of an undeniable truth. Humans were never to be underestimated,